Okay, welcome back to another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is multi-genre author Liese Sherwood-Fabre, and she's here to talk about her mystery series, The Early Case Files of Sherlock Holmes, which should be an interesting chat. So I'm going to turn it over to
Yeah.
her now and let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Oh, well, thanks, Anita, for letting me join you today. I'm really happy to be here. Again, my name is Liese Sherwood-Fabre, and just in case you didn't see it written down, Liese is Liese. It's a German spelling. Long story there, not an interesting one, but long. Uh, um, and I've been writing now for, I was adding it up and I go, my gosh, it's been more than 25 years. And I find that pretty surprising. I started writing when I was living in Mexico. I've lived in Mexico, Honduras, and Russia. And then also I worked for the federal government, and in the federal government, I worked for a while in the international area of the Census Bureau. And so I also worked in other countries, including Burkina Faso. I'm probably one of the few people who can say that they've been to Burkina Faso, other than maybe probably some Peace Corps volunteers or something like that. Um, and the first thing I wrote was a short story. It was a science fiction short story, and I almost immediately got it rejected. But that was okay because it taught me a lot about writing and that I needed more work. And so I then shifted over more to novels. Again, I have some things that are under my bed. Actually, no. Nowadays, it's all in your computer file someplace in the memory. But I have some things that'll probably never get any further than the ones and zeros on your computer. And then I wrote while I was, when we moved to Russia, I learned about some very interesting things that were going on there in terms of Iranians who were seeking unemployed scientists to work on their own bioweapons and nuclear projects, and which are continuing today, I think, if you listen to the news. And I wrote a thriller set in Russia about a Russian microbiologist who stumbles onto a plot to export a bioweapon to Iran. And that one actually, I actually was able to publish that. I sold it in 2012, and then the publisher went out of business. But I republished it myself. It's called Saving Hope. And along the way, I published a number of short stories, and sold some short stories different places. And then I one day got the idea of Sherlock Holmes and wondering how Sherlock Holmes became Sherlock Holmes. And when I did that, I started writing this series, The Early Case Files of Sherlock Holmes. And so that's pretty much where I've been the last few years.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the series. What's it about? Where's it taking
Okay.
place?
Sure. As I said, it's the Early Case Files of Sherlock Holmes. And it's very interesting. Arthur Conan Doyle didn't provide very much information at all about Sherlock Holmes in his stories. In fact, even Watson didn't know he had a brother until I don't know how many adventures or cases he was in before he found out that he even had a brother named Mycroft, who suddenly appears one day. But we know that he was he said, my ancestors were country squires. He said, my grandmother was the sister of Horace Vernet, who was a French artist. And we know that he had his brother Mycroft, and his father was named Seeger. And that's pretty much all the information that we gleaned from the original stories. Now, a lot of that comes with there's a lot of things that are implied because of like being the son of being a country squire meant that you were a magistrate. So there's a lot of information that's kind of in there if you tease it out. But there were a lot of holes, and I had a lot of fun filling in those holes in my stories. I start when he's 13 in his first year at Eton, and his mother he's called home because his mother has been accused of murdering the village midwife. And it's up to him to solve the murder to get his mother out of jail and save her from the gallows. And then I also had to add, I added a lot of information about his family. I mentioned the father was a magistrate. Based on Victorian times, the father would have been somebody who he was loving, but he wasn't very demonstrative about his love. It was this keep the stiff upper lip kind of thing. And since he had a grandmother who was French, I made it on his mother's side. So I gave his mother this kind of bohemian background. And she's also extremely intelligent. And but given Victorian mores, she's not able to do much outside of the house. But she's able to, it was traditional for the mother to be more involved in the children's education. So being a highly intelligent woman, she gets very involved in her two sons' education as well. And so she's kind of the one who pushes them to develop a lot of their intellectual skills. And then I gave her a brother, his uncle, Sherlock's uncle Ernest, who was in who was an officer in India, and he comes home with PTSD. And so one of his things that he focuses on is developing weapons and explosives. And so I make him kind of a Q figure for the family. And
that's interesting.
Yeah. He's in the first book. He has a weapon that he's developed, and it does play a role in the mystery there. And also it reappears in the second one too, thinking about it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you sort of set up the background of how Sherlock Holmes learned all these things that he knows in the Conan Doyle books.
Yeah. It's kind of fun to throw in. I think they call them Easter eggs, the little hints. Like in the first one, he has a deer stalker, the hat, because they're out in the country and they have to go out. They go out hunting for something, and he puts on his deer stalker as he leaves the house. So
that's cute, because that actually never appeared in the books. But
no, I know.
That's a nice little nod to the movies and stuff.
Yeah. Well, the original Paget, the person who did a lot of the illustrations, always drew him with a deer stalker, and that's how that came to pass. Yeah. He does mention in one story that he's wearing a hat with flaps, and he ties the flaps down over his ears. So, but there may be other hats that have flaps besides the deer stalker. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Sherlock Holmes. Have you kept to the traditional?
Yes, I've tried. Yeah, I've tried very hard to, because you do have, I'm imagining what he would have been like as a boy, developing into the man. Probably one of the major differences that I have is he's not quite he's smart. He's he's very intelligent, and he's a little bit socially awkward because I don't know. Most of the time you find nerds tend to be a little bit awkward. I think he's nerdy. They didn't have that term back then, but he's a little bit nerdy and a little bit socially awkward. and still trying to figure out things. He's a teen. He's an early teen in the beginning, and so he's still trying to figure things out. He has a friend named Constance that he meets in the first book, and she's very clever and very skilled in pickpocketing and things. She's of the lower classes, and he befriends her, and he says, look, I'll help you do certain things if you'll help me learn how to be a pickpocket and learn these skills that I don't have that you have. And she's also a girl, and so he's learning a little bit about how women work compared to men, and there's a little bit of interest in her that probably goes beyond just friendship. But he's 13. I'm not going to give him much more to do than that.
So does she play the Watson role, or did you?
No, she plays, well, in some ways, but she more plays, if I were to say that, some people say, is she like an early Eileen Adler? And I would say yes. And that was my kind of where I was going with her, is, why was he so attracted to Eileen Adler? Well, if there was something in the background that kind of resonated with him. That's where I developed this character. Plus, I needed him. He has a familiarity with the lower classes and being able to blend in with different groups. And so it was important for him to get that kind of education. He's not going to get it from an upper class Victorian family.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of a little nod to the Irregulars too, I would think.
Yeah. In the latest book, he comes across some some young boys that are begging, and he actually pulls them in to what he needs done. And that was a fun scene to write. That was fun to pull them in and have them come up with a plan to help him with what he needed done. So that was fun.
Okay, yeah. So speaking of scenes, what was the hardest scene for you to write in the series?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard question to answer, but a very good one. And the reason is because I'm what some people call a pantser. That means I write by the seat of my pants. I have an image. I have an idea for the beginning, and I have an idea maybe of how the whole story or the mystery is going to evolve. And of course, I know at the end they have to solve it. I'll have to admit, sometimes I'm not even sure who the person is that's going to be the main antagonist, or it may shift. And then I have to go back and rewrite stuff. So I don't, as a pantser, in writing historical novels, I have this concern that I need to make sure that it is it's historically accurate, because I know that if I don't get it right, I'm going to hear from somebody. It never fails.
Yeah, you can spend a lot of hours in the research rabbit hole.
Yeah, I do quite a bit of research, actually. And in this latest one, at the beginning, there is a dead body. Somebody floats to shore during the Oxford-Cambridge boat race, and Mycroft knows who it is, and he goes to identify the body. And I had to go, well, where was the body going? I had to learn where the body would have been taken, and what it would have looked like and things. And I learned that they didn't have morgues in 1868 in London. They didn't have morgues yet. And so I had to figure out where they would have taken him, because there would have been the coroner's jury would have had to view the body as well, and things, and where would they have done all this? And because normally they view the body in place if you died at home, but when you float to shore, I'm not sure they would have, the coroner's jury would have been there. And so I had to figure out a place and describe it and everything and hope that I'm pretty accurate. And so it's getting those kinds of, any of the scenes where I have to make sure that they're historically correct, that I have, are the hardest for me to write, to make sure that I do get them right. Yeah.
One of our viewers agrees with us.
Yeah. I agree with you, Christy.
Yeah. And she also follows that up with the what needs to be sneaky facts. So
Yeah.
You find, you go in looking for one thing and then you find another and another and another.
And I'm writing along and I'll go, oh, I need to know something. And I think the hardest part, really harder than writing the scene, is saying, okay, I'm going to stop going down this rabbit hole. I'm going to get back to work. Because it's so easy to get really caught up into something.
Oh yeah. I've spent an hour, 2 hours just researching one little fact that ended up like a sentence in the story of the book. So Anyway, and what was your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote in the series?
Oh, well, I mentioned one about the I think ones where I have humor in them, because they just are fun. They just kind of flow. Usually when I have a scene where something quirky is going on or something, I can just really get into it. Sometimes the fight scenes go well, because usually there has to be a confrontation of some sort between Sherlock and the antagonist at some point. And I think those are also can be fun to write, but I like the ones where I've got a little bit of humor in them. Yeah.
Okay, I have to have a follow-up on the fight scenes, because Sherlock is in his teens and he's fighting with antagonists. How does that work?
Well, for one thing, in book 2, he learns Baritsu, which he mentions in, I think it's I get confused. It's either I guess it's the last bow. Could be the final problem. I get confused. I'm really bad with titles. But where he fights Moriarty and goes over the Rockenbach Falls.
Okay, that's the final problem, I think.
Yeah. I knew it had an N word in it, like final, last. And he mentions when he comes back in the empty house, Watson says, well, how did you survive? And he said, well, I knew Baritsu. And so in book 2, his mother decides it's time that I need self-defense lessons. And so she arranges for a Japanese Baritsu master to come to that and stay with them. And so he learns Baritsu. And so he does have some fight scenes. And usually I have him figure out something related to how he can throw somebody or something. Yeah. A lot of times it's also running and hiding from the person.
Yeah, I would think that would be a wise course when you're 13 and some of your opponents might be considerably bigger than you. So tell us a little bit about the family relationships especially between Sherlock and Mycroft, because I know he's a secondary character in the books.
Yeah. Well, if you read the originals, and I try to stay along with the originals, Mycroft is a creature of habit. He's not very fond of getting out of his routines. And so I kind of make him a little bit of a stick in the mud, not wanting to do any of the kind of, Sherlock is much more willing to go out and do things and collect information. And Mycroft is much more willing to let his brother go and do it. You bring it back and I'll take a look at it, kind of thing. But also they're 7 years apart. And I I don't know if what your relation, if you have brothers and sisters or if you had a relationship, but when you're growing up, chances are it was contentious at times, and so I give them somewhat of a contentious relationship, particularly since Mycroft is 7 years older. He usually views his younger brother as somewhat annoying because, after all, he's younger. So.
Yeah. And I bet he's a little bossy too. So
yeah.
yeah, I've got nothing. I'm the youngest, so I know all about the
I
older
was a big
sibling.
sister. I was a big sister, so I was the one who bossed all the my brother and sister around. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you are a multi-genre author, and you've
Mhm.
mentioned you've written thrillers, and so what genres haven't you written in that you might like to try?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that one. Um, I, I've written some women's fiction, but I've never published in it really, and I think I would like to try that again. Um, the one thing that I enjoy about, and also contemporary, anything contemporary. At the I have a writer friend who writes historical romances, and she said the thing about historical romances is that things don't change. You know, you're not going to. I the one of the women's fiction books that I wrote. I have my main character using a BlackBerry. Who uses BlackBerry anymore? You know, she said at one point it was contemporary, and now I'm almost into historical because of the
Yeah,
changes. So I think something a little more contemporary would be fun, but I think it would be frustrating in that before you know it, you've got a historical.
yeah. I write historical fantasy mostly,
Uh-huh.
but I have recently did a contemporary one, and yeah, the contemporary one was way harder to write than the historical one.
Yeah, and before you know it, it's out of date.
Yeah. Well, this is a fantasy, so there's a lot of magic and stuff. So yeah,
Oh, okay, makes it easier. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
she doesn't like technology, so I don't have to write about it. Anyway, so I think we'll wrap it up there, and let you
Oh,
tell
okay.
everybody where they can find you and your books.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll pass. I'll hold up my
Yes,
the
because they're
yeah.
lovely covers. So yeah, a little
This is
higher.
the first one. Oh,
There we
maybe
go.
so the
Now
whole
it's
thing.
in.
Yeah. Okay. This is the first. This is the second, and this is the one that just came out May 15th.
Yeah.
And they're available wherever at all the online bookstores. I'm widely distributed. Oh, I almost forgot to mention I have an audiobook out also, which are 3 short stories, and that's available as well on just about all the audiobooks sites. It's widely distributed, and you can also check it if you can't find it. Oh, and my books just showed up on Target. You can find me at Target now as well online. And you can go to my website, www.liesesherwood-Fabre, all strung together, no hyphen.com. And I have links there as well. Yeah.
And I linked the series in the description, so if you want to check it out, feel free. And I'd like to thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure
Oh, thanks.
chatting with
This
you.
was fun. Thank you.
Uh,
Appreciate it.
and we'll be back tomorrow with another author, so join us then. And that's all for
Oh,
now.
super.
Bye.
Bye bye.